Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another product review. And the product that we're going to be taking a look at today is a scope from a company called Pinty. And I don't know if you've heard of this company before, but actually I have. Normally when it comes to these very affordable budget optics, I've never heard of the companies. They're just kind of generic names and they're all made in China. But this company, I've seen their products reviewed on other channels much larger than mine and actually gotten pretty decent reviews. They make very affordable scopes. And one of the reasons I like to do these reviews is because not everybody that is in the gun world can afford a $1,000 or $2,000 Trijicon or Night Force scope. And maybe something in the extreme budget area is just what they need. It's all they can afford because they still want to go to the range and have fun. And I want to do these reviews and see if these things are pieces of junk. But other channels have reviewed their products and said, hey, for the price you pay, they're actually pretty darn good. And the product that we're going to be taking a look at today is a 4-in-1 scope, and the model is the HRS-0012-00. And it's supposed to be a 4-in-1 scope. The scope itself is a 4-to-16 powered magnification with a 50mm objective lens. It has a green laser, a red and green red dot sight, and it also comes with a riser. So it claims to have a lot of stuff in this box. So I'm gonna go ahead and adjust the camera. We're gonna open this thing, see what it looks like, what it's all about. We're gonna mount it to a rifle and take it to the range and see if it's actually quality, something in the middle, or a piece of junk. So let me go ahead and adjust the camera and let's see what's in this box. So here's the box this Pinty scope comes in. It's pretty generic, doesn't say really a lot on the side here. It doesn't even show you a picture of the product. It says that it has a wide field of view. It is shock and recoil proof. It has fully coated lenses and is made of aircraft grade aluminum alloy. Is any of that true? I have no idea, but let's find out. Let's open this thing up and actually see what is inside. Looks like we get some silica gel. Let's get that out of the way. We get some tools and batteries. Looks like we have the instructions in there. We have a riser, and it's made of aluminum. Looks like it's okay quality. Kind of feels a little bit cheap and light, but it is what it is. Looks like we get a couple of lens covers here. These are always pretty cheap with many of these affordable scopes. I usually would never use them, but you do get a set. We get a red dot sight. I guess this is the red dot slash green dot sight. Very interesting construction there when it comes to the hood. The hood is very long, but it's just a reflex sight. We have the controls in the back. We have the red and green on. Looks like we have the adjustments on the side and the top. I guess the battery's going to go right there. Okay, so that's the sight that comes with it. Then let's see what else we get here. Okay, so this is going to be, I'm assuming, the green laser. And let's see what this is all about. Okay, so here's the laser sight. Has its own mount, screws on the side. We have the adjustments here and here. Okay, it is what it is. Doesn't look like it has a pressure pad or anything, but there is a button on the side. Okay, so it's a laser sight. And now I guess we get to the main part, the scope itself. And let's get this out of here, get the box out of the way, and open this up. Now this looks kind of goofy in my opinion here, but I know they're trying to go for a tacky cool look here. So you got this crowned bezel on the front. Looks like it's more of a melee weapon. I don't know if that has any function to it whatsoever. But back here on the body of the scope, we do have some rails at the 3, 9, and 12 o'clock position. We have the mount here at the bottom, which is milled into the scope, so you can't change that out even if you wanted to. We have the magnification here on the top from 4 to 16. And that seems to be pretty good as you move it. It's nice and tight. We have the adjustments here on the side. Oh, they are click adjustments. Okay, well, that feels kind of quality. They don't feel chintzy. We have the illuminated reticle here on the back. It looks like it has a green and red settings on it. And we have the adjustment for the focus here in the back. So it kind of looks a little bit on the goofy side, but actually it seems to be decent quality. There is the information on the side of the scope. All right, so I guess I'm supposed to put all of this together, and then we'll mount it to the rifle, see what it looks like, and see if I discover any problems with it. So let me go ahead and do that now, and I'll come back to you and see what I discover. Alright, so I got this scope all mounted up like it's supposed to be on the rifle, or at least according to the way the pictures show it to be mounted to the rifle. I do have a number of concerns, and some pretty big concerns, but there are a few things about this that I actually do like. The first concern I have is going to be the lens covers. These are absolute pieces of junk. They shouldn't even include them, and if you're going to have a scope with a tube that looks like this on the end, that's just not going to be conducive with this little cheap piece of plastic. Just get rid of that. You don't need it at all. Now, when it comes to the laser sight, it's actually pretty decent. It works like a green laser sight should. It goes into this mount just fine. It's in there tight. However, when it comes to the mount that goes on the rail on the side of the tube, these screws don't go through the slots on the rail. So that means if these ever became loose, this sight will start to slide on the rail. Those screws need to go through the slots. I don't know why they didn't do that. That is a terrible design. I think that is a little bit cheap and really wouldn't cost anything to adjust. Then we have the red or green dot sight on the top. And I noticed after mounting it, I have a big gap between the mount and the sight itself. And I was thinking, uh-oh, maybe there's some type of screw that's loose, but everything seems to be tight. And then I discovered that this is for the adjustments of the sight. On most red dot sights, when you do the adjustments, either for elevation or windage, it actually adjusts the emitter inside the sight. However, when you adjust it on this one, it moves the whole sight. And so you have all these springs and adjustments underneath. I think that is kind of cheap. So the emitter itself isn't the part that's moving, it's the whole sight within the mount that is moving. Now let's talk about the electronics of these. I've already shown you the green dot works like a green dot. When it comes to the illumination settings on the scope itself, it actually illuminates green and red. There's no issues with that whatsoever. It really doesn't flood the area inside the scope with a lot of light. Hey, it actually does its job. When it comes to the red dot sight, on the top you have a number of settings. You can have an X, a circle, a dot. Those all seem to work, and the buttons to turn on either the red or the green dot actually work. They're nice and strong. You click both of them to turn them off. When it comes to the adjustments for elevation and windage on the scope itself, those clicks are actually really nice, and it claims here on the top, 1 click is equal to 1/4 MOA. So that's supposed to be pretty fine adjustment. Is that true? I have no idea. I'm also just not a big fan of the way this looks. This looks completely goofy and tactical. There's no need to have that on a scope. That does not look like a respectable scope at all. But for the price, I guess you can't complain when it comes to all of the options you get on this. Now, does this scope actually work? I have no idea, but that's what we're about to find out. So we're going to go to the range. I'm going to test this out at various distances. Now, I'm not going to try to make some type of 300-yard shot with it. Obviously, if you are spending under $100 for this scope, you're just going to the range, maybe shooting at 25, 50, or 100 yards and hoping to put rounds on paper. So can I adjust this, get it to work, and will it hold zero? Well, let's go to the range and find out. And for the scope portion of this review, I have to say I'm actually pleasantly surprised. The scope works. The glass is clear. The click adjustments work really well. They're not overly sensitive. They're 1/4 MOA per click. The only issue I really had with the scope is at the higher magnifications in the field of view on the outer edges, it does get a little bit distorted, but that's to be expected with such an affordable optic. The illumination on the reticle is also perfectly fine both in red and green. So for the cost of this scope, I really can't complain. And if this is all that you can afford, I actually think it would be okay. Now, the next thing I want to test is this red dot. And before we get to this portion of the test, I want to say this might be a big issue for some people. Of course, the red dot is mounted on the top part of this scope. And if you are using the riser to get the scope at your eye level, this red dot is exceptionally high. You're not really going to be able to get a good cheek weld with it because you have to raise your head up so far. But if you take the riser off, to use the red dot, essentially the scope is unusable, it's way too low, and now you just have a gigantic mount for your red dot. So I am going to review this with the riser. I'm not going to get a proper cheek weld, and I'm just going to make sure that the red dot works, it doesn't flicker, you can adjust it easily, and just see if I discover any problems with it. But of course, we're going to do this at a closer range. So here we go. Let's go test this red dot out. And like the scope, the red dot actually works. All of the different reticles are fine, and it seems to hold 0. It's a little bit harder to adjust because of its cheaper design. And let me show you what I'm talking about. I discovered that when you do the adjustments, you will see a bunch of space under the base of the red dot. And that is because the adjustments on this dot do not adjust the emitter internally, but adjust the whole base of the red dot. And that is a cheap and chintzy workaround. Every other red dot out there, including the cheap ones from China, have an internal adjustment. So this is kind of weird, and I feel like it's much harder to get a good 0. But it does work, and it does appear to hold 0. So I have to give it a little bit of credit. It's just not engineered as well. Also, it is really weird having that red dot set so high. For me, it's unusable. It's not a good backup. The only way this would work is if the whole scope was mounted lower, but then I can't actually use the scope itself. But if you don't mind that, I guess it might work for you. All right, so the next test I want to do is, of course, of the laser. Now, I think lasers in general are pretty gimmicky. I don't like to use them. I don't understand their tactical advantage, but it is part of this scope package, so of course I want to try it out. So let's go back to the range. I'm not even going to look through either of the optics. I'm just going to use the laser, see where it's impacting, try to adjust it 0, see if I can get it on target, and essentially, does it work? And like the scope and the red dot, the laser actually works. But unlike the other two, this is the most difficult one to zero. It's the hardest to adjust because the screws don't have any detents and they seem to be exceptionally oversensitive. The slightest change in them will dramatically change the point of impact. Now, when it comes to the laser's function, it's probably the brightest and most intense laser I have ever seen, outside of military grade lasers. And it did not flicker, so its function is perfectly fine. It just really takes a long time to dial it in, and I don't like that, especially for something that I think is a gimmick. So, what are my final thoughts on the Pinty 4-in-1 optic? Well, let's talk about each one of the features once again. I think the scope is the most practical and useful part of this package. It's the one that impressed me the most. It works. It has very clear glass. When it comes to the adjustments, they hold 0. They're not overly sensitive. They work. The illuminated reticle simply works. And I have to say, for the price that this optic is, I don't think you would be disappointed with the scope feature. And if you're looking for the cheapest entry-level scope possible, it might work for you if this is all that you can afford. Now, when it comes to the red dot, it's simply mounted too high. It's cheaply designed. It should have internal adjustments, not an external adjustment that changes the whole base. But I will say the red dot works. I guess as a backup, it would be perfectly fine. But if you have the scope in line with your eyes, the red dot is too high. But if you brought it down, the scope would be unusable. Now, when it comes to the laser, as I said, I kind of think it's a gimmick. It's way too hard to adjust. The adjustments are simply too sensitive. But if you like running lasers and you have the time, I guess it would work for you. But all the functions of this scope work. All the adjustments work. And all 3 of the functions seem to hold 0 once you get them set where you want them. So I cannot complain about that. So for an optic that is this cheap, I have to say it's actually okay. Now, in any way, is this in the same realm as an EOTech or a Trijicon or an Aimpoint or a Nightforce? Absolutely not. This thing could not hold a candle to any of those. But if you're just starting out on your Second Amendment journey and you've saved up a lot to get a decent rifle or an entry-level AR-15 and you can't afford anything else, but you just want to learn the basics of how optics work, this might be an okay option for you. I would definitely recommend in the future, whenever you could afford it, to upgrade to something better, but this works. It didn't fall apart at the range. I'm actually kind of impressed with it. I still think it is a little bit goofy looking with that bezel on the front looking like a melee weapon, but it is what it is. And so for the price, I guess you can't complain. So on my star system, how would I rate the Pinty 4-in-1 optic? Well, I'm going to give this 3 out of 5 stars. An average rating. Everything on it works, and I don't think you would be disappointed with it for the price you pay. However, I would say if you can in the future, definitely save up and buy something a little bit nicer. The best part of this package is the scope, and in my opinion, they could do away with the red dot and the laser and charge the same amount of money and it would be perfectly fine. I really wish you could get different mounting options for this. Them having the mount built into the scope, I don't think gives people enough options. It should use traditional scope rings, and I would much prefer that. But overall, 3 out of 5 stars for the Pinty 4-in-1 optic. It works, it functions, it holds 0. I really don't have anything terrible to say about it. So I guess if you're just starting out in your Second Amendment journey, it might be an okay option. So let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Have you ever bought anything like this? And did your experiences mirror mine? I would love to know. So, as always, thanks for watching.